I've seen the word before, but I don't know what it means or how to say it. A light drizzle began to patter the top of my head, prompting the crickets to chirp around me loudly. I found Souma glancing up towards the sky, which glowed with a beautiful patchwork of stars. "What are you staring at?" I asked him amiably, and he gradually turned over to look at me.
北進の星です。道しるべと言われています。
Placemaker?
はい。他の星がどれだけ動いても、あの星だけは決して動きませんから。昔から旅人は北進の星を目印にすると言われてるんです。斉藤さんの話を聞いて、そのことを思い出していました。
As I had thought, Saito's insightful revelation resonated strongly with Souma, and I felt happy listening to his candid musings.
俺は本物の武士になりたくて新選組に入りました。さっき斉藤さんに言われた俺の道しるべとは何なのだろうと、ここで死ぬ覚悟があるのかと自問してみました。
Then Souma tenderly reached his hand over to the sword resting on his hip.
少なくとも俺はこの刀を土方副長のもとに届けなくてはなりません。局長や井上さん、山崎さん、原田さん、皆さん方から託された思いもあります。出た結論はまだここで死ぬわけにはいかないということでした。俺の命を預けるに足る道しるべが何なのかを確かめるためにも、土方副長のもとに行かなくてはならないと、そう思っていたところです。あの方と再会できたその時に、きっと俺の道しるべも見つかると思いますから。
Souma. Only yesterday, I thought Souma had succumbed to his despair, so hearing him speak so optimistically about the future was a sign of tremendous growth. He no longer seemed burdened by survivor's guilt, unfettered by his self-imposed emotional exile. At last, he saw the worth in himself that I'd seen in him all along. As a mentor and as a friend, I beamed with pride, and it inspired a similar will to live in myself. I admire your strength, Souma.
こう考えられるようになったのは雪村先輩のおかげでもあるんです。
Me?
はい。先輩はこんな俺のため親身になって相談に乗ってくれて、一緒に考えてくれて、俺が答えを出すための材料をたくさんくれました。そんな先輩を見ていて思ったんです。ずっとこのまま後ろばかり向いているわけにはいかないと。
Souma. I felt endeared to his words of gratitude, which filled my chest with indelible warmth. If my words were enough to lift his spirits in times of distress, then I was beginning to identify what my purpose in all of this had been, giving me a kind of fulfillment that I'd been missing for ages.
すみません。さっきからずっと俺ばかり話してますね。先輩、退屈じゃないですか。
I had to choose my response carefully. And the answer is, tell me more. Speaking with you is one of my favorite things, Souma. Tell me more about how you feel.
本当ですか。俺あんまり気が回る方じゃないんですけど。
Terrible memory? That's news to me. You think so? I find your presence quite calming, and you're considerate of others.
いえ、そんなことはまだまだ未熟者ですし。それに俺、新選組に入る前は女の人と二人きりで話したことなんてありませんでしたから。
Yeah. What's so bad about that? That has no real bearing on anything, does it?
そうですよね。俺何を言ってるんでしょう。今の忘れてください。本当にすみません。
Oh, okay. Although Souma was quick to dismiss the subject, there was no way I could forget what he said. Yeah, no, there's no way to forget what you just said, Souma. Something compelled me to look into his weary eyes, which glowed gorgeously under the night sky. I need to learn how to read properly. We should head back to camp soon, right? We've got an early start tomorrow morning. Souma?
いえ、何でもありません。先輩は先に戻っていてください。
I immediately thought something was up as his eyes sunk into his increasingly pale face. Is it bloodlust?
大丈夫です。これくらいなら少し我慢すればやり過ごせますから。
Hello, round 3! In response, I chose to, and say it with me now as always, give him blood. As his bout of bloodlust intensified, I realized that giving my blood was the only real deterrent. I unsheathed my kodachi and watched the blood thicken around the incision I'd made across the length of my palm. He still questions it all this time, which is surprising. Souma, drink me. Take me in. Souma convulsed in front of me, shutting his eyes while he hesitated whether or not to accept. Finally, he relented and moved behind me as he began lapping up my blood-drenched hand. What is it, Souma?
もし今こうして苦しんでるのが俺じゃなかったとしても、先輩は同じことを。
I feel like that's a loaded question. Huh?
何でもありません。
As his tongue raced up and down to cut down my cut to catch every drop of blood before it fell, I pondered Souma's question to myself curiously, though he never quite clarified what he'd meant. We awoke on soft futons nestled in a warm tent. Words of farewell were delivered somberly as Saito saw us off at the crack of dawn. I grew teary-eyed, realizing that it could be the last time any of us spoke to Saito again. With this thought at the forefront of my mind, I struggled to think of a meaningful goodbye. Souma and Omura too were awkwardly silent. Thankfully for us, Saito was a man of few words and took the initiative in bidding us farewell.
再会が叶ったら副長によろしく伝えてくれ。あんたたちの無事を祈っている。
It was obvious that Souma was holding back more than he had been letting on, and was gritting his teeth to restrain himself. My eyes darted between Souma and Saito until...
はい。会津公や会津藩の方々によろしくお伝えください。斉藤さんもどうかご無事で。
今まで本当お世話になりました。何もできなくてすいません。
Until next time, right, Saito?
ああ、そうだな。
I hadn't wanted Saito to see my eyes welling up with tears, so I gazed off towards the horizon. With that, the three of us bowed in succession and began walking towards Sendai. While there was no guarantee that it would be our last time seeing Saito, having said our fair share of final goodbyes over these past few weeks had left us several times bitten and more broken than shy. As we hiked over a steep hilltop, Souma, Nomura, and I reached an unpaved road, and soon...
伏せてください、先輩!
Souma reached out to grab my arm and yanked me low to the ground in the nick of time. Oh god, cannon fire roared in the distance, rumbling us as we laid our bodies upon the coarse earth.
新政府軍の奴ら本気で合図を潰すつもりで来てやがるみてえだな。
Fear welled up inside of me as this yawn had appeared out of nowhere. My initial instinct was to worry about Saito, and I questioned whether or not leaving him behind was the correct decision after all.
仙台へ急ぎましょう。土方副長が援軍要請に向かっていると斉藤さんがおっしゃっていましたから。
そうだな。
As the bombast of cannon fire echoed around us, we continued down the trail, taking every other step to steady ourselves as the ground felt ready to split in two and swallow us whole. And now we're in October. Oh no. I know what next month means. By the next day, we had finally arrived in Sendai and reunited with Hijikata-san after partaking in a wild goose chase of monumental proportions.
仙台藩との交渉が頓挫した。
どうも新政府軍の勢いに腰が引けちまったらしい。
Oh! Sendai is out of the picture now!
そんな、それでは会津藩は
Without any hope of reinforcements to back the shogun and loyalists in Aizu, the imperial army would likely plow through their camp in hours. Which, for Saito and the rest of his men, spelled almost certain death.
くそ、なんなんだよ。どいつもこいつも旗色が悪くなるとすぐに手のひら返しやがって。
声がでけえぞ、村。気持ちはわからなくもねえが、交渉が物別れに終わっちまった以上、これ以上の長居は無駄だ。宿に戻るぞ。
With Hichikata-san as our guide, we navigated through Sendai, unable to avoid the stares from townsfolk who were put at unease from our presence. Hichikata-san set us down at the inn, and Souma was the first to brief him on all that had happened.
先にお詫びしておきます。俺はあなたから近藤局長の除名嘆願を命じられていましたが、力及ばず果たせませんでした。
For a split second, sorrow appeared in Hichikata-san's eyes, as if Souma's mention had reawakened his grief, but he just as quickly shrugged it off.
そうか。
For the most part, this wasn't news to Hichikata-san. He nodded, keeping his feelings to himself.
こちらの刀をお納めください。局長からお預かりしたものです。
近藤さんから？
はい。井上新海。新選組の再起を願って入手したものだそうです。
Hishikata-san grabbed a hold of the sword, entering a state of deep thought as he scanned the blade. After rolling it in his hands, he faced Souma.
そいつはお前がもうしばらく預かっててくれ。
ですが。
新選組は俺と近藤さんの二人で大きくしてきたものだからな。誠を改めるなんて言われてもすぐには心の整理をつけられそうにねえんだ。
わかりました。
Souma stared intently at Hichikata-san, giving tender consideration to his words as Hichikata-san handed the sword back to him.
それからもう一つ言わなきゃならないことがあるんです。俺たち江戸で原田さんに会ったんですけど。
原田に？
はい。将棋隊の手助けをしていたと伺ったのですが、その後我々を江戸から逃がすためおとりとなって。
Hichikata-san let out a heavy, pained sigh.
そうか。原田も。
Oh god, this hurts for him a lot. After stewing in silence, Hichikata-san looked up at us.
俺の方からもお前らに伝えなきゃならねえことがある。
Oh no. I'm not ready for this news. I'm pretty sure I know what it is, but I'm not ready for it. His preface was damning, to say the least. All of us braced ourselves around the table in anticipation. He took in a deep breath and broke the news.
この間松本先生から手紙が届いた。掃除のやつが亡くなったってな。
Wait.
沖田さんが。
三男さんと平助もだ。新政府軍側の羅刹を率いてた高堂さんと差し違えてな。
Wait. Hold on. Huh? But we just saw Okita. What the? Hello? Do we get an explanation for this? Hopefully we do. No! I was beginning to feel nauseous, like all of my happiness had left me and was certain never to return. I nearly fainted for delirium. As I fell to the ground, I slammed my palm to the floor and tried to support myself up. Okita-san, and Heisuke had all lost their lives fighting in this unnecessary war. Okay. Did the writers forget what they wrote? Right. Where's my book? I'm writing this down. Souma inconsistency. What? This is what I'm confused about, because literally before we arrived at the camp that we just left, we left behind Okita and Heisuke, and they were fighting a pack of furies. So I thought that's where they would die, but how would Matsumoto-sensei know that Okita had passed away? If that was the case? Man, I am so confused. What did the writers do? Well, I'm writing that down. And I don't know where Sanan came from. Knowing too that it was my father's doing was enough to send me into a downward spiral.
Senpai, 大丈夫ですか?
Don't worry about me. I'll be alright. Then Souma posed another question at Hijikata-san.
行動さんたちと差し違えたということは、羅刹になったミキも。
詳しいことは俺にもわからねえ。
Oh, are we making our departure here? Are we splitting from where we normally supposed to be?
もし奴がその場に居合わせたんなら、三男さんたちが気づいたはずだと思うんだ。
そうですか。
Eventually, Hijikata straightened his posture and cleared his throat, looking at each of us individually before continuing on.
俺たちはこれから蝦夷地を目指すつもりだ。
蝦夷地?
Ezo was a remote, snowy wasteland located on the northernmost tip of our country.
蝦夷で負けちまったら後はねえ。お前らがこれ以上俺たちに付き合う必要は。
Just as Hijikata-san braced himself for disappointment.
ついていくに決まってるじゃないですか。
You two, just alright. That's a first. Never. Okay, that's a. This game has never had two lines at the same time. Wow. Okay. Both of them practically spat the words out of their mouths, answering in total confidence. Groundbreaking.
水臭いっすよ、土方副長。俺たちが何のためにここまで来たと思ってるんですか？
我々は命などとうに捨てています。新選組大使ですから。
I could have sworn I saw Hijikata-san's eyes flutter, perhaps because a solitary tear was ready to escape his eyes ducked, but after a quick series of blinks, it disappeared.
たく、お前ら。
Hijikata, you have some proud boys that don't want to leave your side.
今戦いから降りちまえば静かに生きていくこともできるのによ。
It was a harsh reality, one we all had all considered. But Hijikata-san smiled wearily, glancing at the two of them with immense pride in his eyes. I'm never gonna learn how to say wearily correctly ever, just because, I don't know, I like the way I say it. All of a sudden, he turned to look at me.
ユキモ、お前はどうするんだ?
At first, I felt too hesitant to answer. All this time, my only focus was reuniting Hijikata-san with Souma and Nomura. But now that our journey had met its conclusion, it felt as though I'd used up all of my time and goodwill with them. But parting ways with them meant leaving. Souma. My North Star. The shining light around which my emotions formed vivid constellations. I realized that night that I was falling for him. I wanted more than anything to be the beacon that inspired and encouraged him in times of need. Part of me felt like I was already halfway there. But would Hijikata-san entertain my desire? Or, like I had feared, had I simply become a burden that had no place in the story they were building? Let me join you, Hijikata! We're going to Ezo! We are going to Ezo! You're not gonna stop me! What in the world was I contemplating for? I looked Hijikata-san directly in the eye. Please let me join you. I still feel a part of this too, and I don't think I could say goodbye to Souma and Nomura just yet. Please. I spilled my heart out in front of them, bowing my head in the hope that I would flatter Hijikata-san.
Hijikata 副長、俺からもお願いします。俺からも。ここで先輩だけ江戸にとんぼ帰りなんてあんまりだろう。
誰も置いていくとは言ってねえだろ。にしてもお前は向こう水っつうか命知らずっつうか。
I think you're starting to rub off on me. Oh. Later that evening, I had noticed that Souma wasn't inside of his bedroom, so I stepped outside to find him. There he was, gazing up at the stars again.
雪村先輩、どうしたんですか？俺に何か用事でも。
Nothing. I just noticed you weren't inside of your bedroom, and I got a little worried. Why'd you step outside? Is something on your mind?
はい。今までのことを思い出してました。
I see. Souma turned his gaze over towards the sea as high tide encroached us near the shore.
ようやくタイに土方副長のもとに復帰できて、誠の大気の下で戦えるようになりました。俺に多くの思いを託してくださった皆さん方のためにも、新選組大使として恥ずかしい戦いをするわけにはいきません。
Right. It seems as though the days following the Battle of Toba Fushimi amounted to one continuous adjustment to loss, far beyond where the eye could see. Ezo awaited us, and a decisive battle loomed. Souma kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, and the luminous moon glowed in both the sea and sky. So the text says, even though it's clearly evening. Thanks to Hijikata-san, Souma had finally affirmed his purpose, just as Saito had predicted. Seeing him stand with a resort sense of dignity made my heart flutter in my chest. I was sure that, more than anything, he'd wanted a reason to prove his worth with his sword.
先輩、どうしたんですか？さっきからすごく静かですから、ひょっとしたら泣いてるんじゃないかと思って。
I'm just... Souma was a perceptive soul. Although he never would have admitted it, I was certain he knew exactly what I was thinking. But allowing him to catch on might have caused a quagmire when what we needed was stability. If he were to become keen on my feelings and discover that he is the object of my affection, I was afraid he would slink back into his own head. I'm going to head back inside the inn, okay? What is it?
いえ、何でもありません。
Souma averted his gaze, watching the dust cover the sky like orange print smeared across a black canvas, sitting atop a calm, cerulean ocean. That is a way to describe it. I spun around and stepped towards the inn when something eerie struck me, and I felt a surge of emotion like the likes of which I'd never felt before. Please don't die. But they were words I never could have said to his face. The next morning, we prepared to board the ship. Oh boy, another boat!
そんじゃあ行くとするか。蝦夷地に着いたら存分にこき使ってやるからな。覚悟しとけよ。
もちろんです。何でも申し付けてください。
待ってました。ここまで来たら地獄の底までお供しますよ。
地獄の底って、もう少しいい例えはないのか。縁起が悪いだろ
う。んなことはねえさ。俺たちの大服、アサギの羽織の色は死に装束の色だしな。
What do you mean it was a funeral outfit, Hichikata? Ahead of us, chaos and strife beckoned. But none of them looked bothered at all. At this stage in the war, victory and defeat were concepts that lost their meaning, giving way to an opportunity to be brave in the face of change. A chilly breeze made the hair stand along my forearm as I stepped onto the ship's deck. The sails were lowered, and Ezo awaited us. I held my breath, thinking about our old friends,